The Endurance glided silently through the inky blackness of space, its sleek hull cutting effortlessly through the void. On the bridge, Captain Nora Vega stood tall, her piercing gaze scanning the surrounding systems with unwavering focus. This was no routine supply run. The fate of a human colony hung in the balance. "Helm, status report," Vega commanded, her voice authoritative yet tinged with a hint of tension. "All systems nominal, Captain," her first officer, Commander Ethan Sharp, replied. "Jump drive is charged and ready, and we're on course to reach the colony within the next 2 days." Vega nodded, her jaw set with determination. "Good. Maintain course and speed. I want constant vigilance. We can't afford any surprises out here." The Endurance was a marvel of human engineering, a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of its creators. Equipped with the latest in propulsion and defensive technologies, the ship was built to traverse the treacherous corridors of interstellar space. But even with its impressive capabilities, Vega knew the journey ahead would be fraught with peril. "Captain, we're detecting a large energy signature on the edge of our sensors," the ship's sensor officer, Lieutenant Avan Guian, reported, her voice tinged with concern. "It matches the profile of an alien dreadnought." Vega's eyes narrowed, her mind racing. "Battle stations," she ordered, her calm demeanor belying the surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Helm, evasive maneuvers, maximum speed. Tactical, prepare to engage." The Endurance's crew sprang into action, their training and discipline taking over as they responded to the captain's commands. The ship's engines roared to life, propelling the vessel forward with bone-jarring acceleration. As the alien dreadnought loomed into view, Vega felt a chill run down her spine. The massive vessel, its hull covered in menacing armored plates, dwarfed the Endurance in size and firepower. She knew that a direct confrontation would be suicide, but retreat was not an option. The colony was counting on them. "Lieutenant Nguyen, give me a full tactical analysis," Vega said, her eyes never leaving the alien ship. "The dreadnought is heavily armed, Captain," Nguyen replied, her fingers flying across the console. "Multiple particle beam cannons, torpedo batteries, and a powerful energy beam that could cripple us with a single shot. Their shields are impenetrable to our current weapon systems." Vega's jaw tightened, but she refused to let the gravity of the situation show. "Then we'll have to get creative. Sharp, prep the experimental combat protocols. If we can't outgun them, we'll have to outsmart them." Aye, Captain," Sharp replied, already relaying the orders to the engineering team. Dr. Sarah Johnson, the Endurance's brilliant and resourceful chief engineer, had been working on a series of innovative combat technologies, each one designed to give the human vessel an edge in the face of overwhelming alien firepower. Vega knew they were untested, but with no other viable options, she was willing to take the risk. As the Endurance closed the distance, the alien dreadnought's weapons systems came to life, a barrage of energy beams and missiles streaking towards the human vessel. Vega gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white, as she watched the devastation unfold. "All hands, brace for impact," she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. The Endurance shuddered as the first volley of enemy fire slammed into its shields, the energy readings spiking dangerously. Vega held her breath, praying that the experimental combat protocols would be enough to turn the tide of the battle. "Captain, the combat protocols are active," Sharp reported, his voice tinged with a hint of uncertainty. "Defensive systems are reconfiguring, but I can't guarantee they'll hold against another assault." Vega nodded, her gaze fixed on the view screen as the Endurance continued its perilous dance with the alien dreadnought. "Then we'll have to make this one count. Helm, bring us in close and prepare to execute the plan." As the Endurance hurtled towards the massive alien vessel, Vega steeled herself for the fight of her life. The fate of the colony, and perhaps the future of humanity, hung in the balance. She would not fail. The Endurance surged forward, its sleek frame cutting through the void as it closed the distance to the alien dreadnought. Captain Vega gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white as she watched the enemy vessel's weapon systems light up, a barrage of energy beams and missiles streaking towards her ship. "Brace for impact," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. The Endurance shuddered as the first volley of enemy fire slammed into its shields, the energy readings spiking dangerously. Vega held her breath, praying that the experimental combat protocols activated by Dr. Sarah Johnson, the ship's brilliant chief engineer, would be enough to turn the tide of the battle. "Shields down to 60% and falling, Captain," Sharp reported, his voice tense. "We can't take another hit like that." Vega's jaw tightened, her mind racing as she considered their options. Helm, keep us moving. Evasive maneuvers. Nguyen, target their weapon systems and fire everything we've got. The Endurance's weapons came to life, a barrage of plasma bolts and missiles streaking towards the alien dreadnought. But to Vega's dismay, the attack simply bounced off the enemy's impenetrable shields. "No effect, Captain," Nguyen said, her frustration evident. "Their defenses are too strong." Vega gritted her teeth, her eyes narrowing as she stared down the imposing alien vessel. "Johnson, status on those combat protocols." "Working on it, Captain." The engineer's voice crackled over the comm, the sound of frantic activity in the background. "I'm reconfiguring the system to disrupt their targeting algorithms. Just give me a little more time." Time, Vega realized, was something they didn't have. The alien dreadnought was closing in, its massive weapons systems primed to unleash devastation upon the Endurance. She knew they needed to act quickly, before the ship was reduced to little more than a drifting hulk. "Helm, bring us within range of their main cannon," Vega commanded, her voice calm and unwavering. Sharp's eyes widened in alarm. "Captain, you can't be serious. That's suicide." Vega turned to him, her gaze resolute. "Trust me, Commander. We don't have a choice." As the Endurance hurtled towards the alien dreadnought, the massive vessel's main cannon began to charge, its energy levels rising to critical levels. Vega's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to let the fear show. "Johnson, now would be a good time," she muttered under her breath. Just as the alien cannon fired, a brilliant flash of light engulfed the Endurance, its shields flaring to life with an intensity that blinded the bridge crew. The massive energy beam struck the human vessel, but instead of tearing it apart, the shields seemed to absorb the energy, redirecting it away from the ship. "What the?" Sharp breathed, his eyes wide with astonishment. On the engineering deck, Dr. Johnson let out a triumphant whoop. "I did it. The combat protocols are working. We're disrupting their targeting systems and creating a feedback loop in their energy beam. Keep us in range, Nora, and we might just make it out of this." Vega's lips curled into a grim smile. "You heard the lady, Sharp. Helm, maintain course and speed. Let's show these aliens what humanity is made of." The Endurance surged forward, its shields glowing with an unearthly brilliance as it weathered the alien dreadnought's relentless assault. Vega watched in awe as the enemy's devastating firepower was turned against itself, the feedback loop sapping the massive vessel's energy reserves with each passing moment. "Shields holding at 85%, Captain," Nguyen reported, her voice tinged with disbelief. "The combat protocols are working." Vega allowed herself a brief moment of triumph, but she knew they were far from out of the woods. The alien dreadnought, sensing the threat, had begun to retaliate with a barrage of missiles and secondary weapon systems, forcing the Endurance to weave and dodge through the hail of fire. "Johnson, how long can we keep this up?" Vega asked, her eyes never leaving the view screen. "I'm not sure, Captain," the engineer replied, her voice strained. "The combat protocols are pushing the system to its limits. We need to end this quickly, before the Endurance takes too much damage." Vega's jaw tightened with determination. "Then let's finish this. Helm, bring us in close and prepare for a full-scale assault. Nguyen, target their main reactor and fire everything we've got." As the Endurance hurtled towards the alien dreadnought, its weapons systems unleashing a devastating barrage, Vega felt a surge of hope. This was humanity's moment to shine, to prove that they were more than just a fledgling species in the vast expanse of the cosmos. They were a force to be reckoned with, and she would be damned if they were going to let this alien monstrosity stand in their way. The Endurance surged forward, its weapons blazing with a renewed intensity as it closed the distance to the alien dreadnought. Captain Vega gripped the arms of her chair, her eyes narrowed with fierce determination as she watched the battle unfold. "All batteries, fire at will," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. The Endurance's arsenal unleashed a devastating barrage of plasma bolts, missiles, and energy beams, the combined firepower slamming into the alien vessel's shields with earth-shattering force. To Vega's satisfaction, the enemy's defensive systems were beginning to buckle under the relentless assault. "Their shields are down to 40% and falling, Captain," Lieutenant Nguyen reported, her fingers dancing across the tactical console. "We're starting to penetrate their defenses." Vega allowed herself a brief smile, but she knew they couldn't afford to let up. "Keep up the pressure, Nguyen. I want the dreadnought's reactor core exposed and ready for the kill shot." On the engineering deck, Dr. Sarah Johnson was frantically working to maintain the Endurance's experimental combat protocols. The innovative systems were the only thing keeping the human vessel alive in the face of the aliens' overwhelming firepower, but they were pushing the ship's systems to their limits. "Shields down to 60%, Captain," Sharp reported, his brow furrowed with concern. "We can't take much more of this." Vega's jaw tightened, her mind racing as she considered their options. "Johnson, how much longer can we keep this up?" "I'm not sure, Nora," the engineer replied, her voice strained. "The combat protocols are draining our power reserves faster than I anticipated. We need to end this quickly, or we won't have enough juice left to make it back to the colony." Vega nodded, her gaze fixed on the viewscreen as the Endurance continued its relentless assault on the alien dreadnought. "Then let's make this count. Nguyen, target their main reactor. Johnson, divert all available power to the weapons systems." The Endurance's guns roared to life, a barrage of concentrated energy beams and missiles streaking towards the alien vessel's core. Vega held her breath, watching as the projectiles slammed into the dreadnought's weakened defenses, burrowing deep into its heart. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the alien ship, its massive hull buckling and disintegrating under the force of the blast. Vega's crew erupted in a cheer, their elation palpable in the air. "Direct hit on the reactor core, Captain," Nguyen exclaimed, her eyes shining with triumph. "The dreadnought is crippled, and it's venting atmosphere fast." Vega allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but she knew their victory was far from assured. The alien commander, no doubt enraged by the loss of his ship, would not take this defeat lightly. "Helm, get us out of here, maximum warp," she ordered, her voice calm and steady. "Nguyen, keep sensors peeled for any other hostiles in the area. I have a feeling this isn't over." As the Endurance hurtled through the void, its engines straining to reach the safety of the colony, Vega couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The alien dreadnought's commander had proven to be a formidable foe, and she knew that he would not rest until he had extracted his revenge. "Captain, we're detecting a massive energy surge in the debris field," Nguyen reported, her voice tinged with alarm. "It's the dreadnought's main reactor. It's about to go critical." Vega's eyes widened in horror. "Sharp, get us out of here now." But the Endurance was already too far away, its engines struggling to maintain their breakneck pace. Vega watched helplessly as the alien vessel's reactor core detonated in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave rippling through the void and slamming into the human ship. The Endurance shuddered under the impact, its shields flickering and failing as the crew fought to maintain control. Vega gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white, as she braced for the inevitable. "Shields down, hull breaches on decks 4 through 8, Sharp reported, his voice tinged with panic. We're venting atmosphere, and the warp drive is offline. Vega's jaw tightened, her mind racing as she considered their options. They were crippled, adrift in the middle of a war zone, and with no means of escape. But she refused to give up, not when they were so close to their destination. Damage control teams, get those breaches sealed, she ordered, her voice calm and unwavering. Nguyen, scan for any nearby ships, friendly or otherwise. We need to get back on the move, and fast. As the Endurance drifted in the void, its crew working frantically to restore their battered systems, Vega couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The alien dreadnought's commander had proven to be a formidable foe, and she knew that he would not rest until he had extracted his revenge. But she was determined to see this mission through, no matter the cost. The Endurance drifted in the void, it hull scared and battered from the intense battle with the alien dreadnought. Captain Vega stared out the view screen, her jaw set with determination, as she surveyed the damage to her ship. "Status report," she commanded, her voice betraying none of the worry she felt. "Warp drive is offline, Captain," Sharp reported, his fingers flying across the console. "We've got multiple hull breaches, and life support is running on emergency power. Engineering teams are working around the clock to get us back in the fight, but it's going to take time." Vega nodded, her gaze shifting to the sensor readouts. "And the alien dreadnought?" "Still out there, sir," Nguyen replied, her voice tinged with concern. "It's maneuvering to pursue us, and it looks like it's rallying more ships to its position." Vega's eyes narrowed. So much for a quick getaway. "Johnson, how long before we can get the warp drive back online?" The engineer's voice crackled over the comm, the sound of frantic activity in the background. "I'm not sure, Captain. The reactor core took a beating, and we're running low on critical components. If we had access to a shipyard, I could probably have us up and running in a few hours. But out here..." She trailed off, the implication clear. Vega's jaw tightened. They were sitting ducks, vulnerable and exposed in the middle of a war zone, with a vengeful alien commander closing in fast. She knew they needed to act quickly, but with their systems crippled and their options limited, the odds of survival were slim. "All right, people, listen up," Vega said, her voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "We may be down, but we're not out. Johnson, I need you to work your magic and get that warp drive back online as soon as possible. Nguyen, keep those sensors peeled for any sign of the enemy. Sharp, I want all available power diverted to the shields and weapon systems. We're going to give these aliens a fight they'll never forget." As the crew sprang into action, Vega turned her attention to the tactical display, her mind racing. The alien dreadnought was closing in fast, its weapon systems primed and ready to unleash devastation upon the crippled Endurance. She knew they couldn't afford to take another hit like the one that had disabled their warp drive, but with their options limited, they would have to find a way to even the odds. "Captain, the enemy ships are within firing range," Nguyen reported, her voice tense. "They're powering up their main cannons." Vega's grip tightened on the arms of her chair. "All hands, brace for impact." The Endurance shuddered as the alien vessels opened fire, a barrage of energy beams and missiles slamming into the human ship's weakened shields. Vega gritted her teeth, watching as the display flickered and flashed, the strain on the system evident. "Shields down to 30% and falling," Sharp reported, his voice tinged with desperation. "We can't take much more of this." Vega's mind raced, searching for a solution. They needed to buy time, to find a way to turn the tide of the battle. And then, an idea struck her. "Johnson, can you reconfigure the combat protocols to disrupt the enemy's targeting systems?" she asked, her voice urgent. I think so, Captain," the engineer replied, her voice uncertain. "But it's going to take some time to reprogram the algorithms. We're talking minutes, maybe even seconds, before the enemy overwhelms us." Vega nodded, her gaze steely. "Then you'd better get to work. Nguyen, Sharp, I need you to keep those ships off our backs. Give Johnson everything you've got." The Endurance's weapons systems came to life, a barrage of plasma bolts and missiles streaking towards the alien vessels. But even as the human ship fought back, the enemy's firepower continued to pummel their shields, the strain on the systems becoming increasingly evident. "Shields down to 15%, Captain," Sharp reported, his voice tinged with desperation. "We can't hold out much longer." Vega's jaw tightened, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The alien ships were closing in, their massive weapons systems primed and ready to deliver the killing blow. She knew they were running out of time, but she refused to give up. "Keep fighting, people," she said, her voice calm and steady. "Johnson, you'd better have something for us." On the engineering deck, Dr. Johnson worked furiously, her fingers flying across the console as she reconfigured the combat protocols. She knew that the fate of the Endurance, and perhaps the entire human colony, rested on her shoulders. Gritting her teeth, she pushed the systems to their limits, determined to turn the tide of the battle. The Endurance shuddered under the relentless barrage of the alien vessels, its shields flickering and failing, as the crew fought to keep the battered ship in one piece. Captain Vega's knuckles turned white as she gripped the arms of her chair, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Shields down to 10%, Captain," Sharp reported, his voice tinged with desperation. "We can't take another hit like that." Vega's jaw tightened, her mind racing as she searched for a way to turn the tide of the battle. They were outmatched, outgunned, and on the verge of being overwhelmed, but she refused to give up. "Johnson, where are we with those combat protocols?" she called out, her voice betraying a hint of urgency. "Almost there, Nora." The engineer's voice crackled over the comm, the sound of frantic activity in the background. "Just a few more seconds and I'll have the system reconfigured." Vega nodded, her gaze shifting to the view screen as the alien vessels closed in for the kill. "Nguyen, target their weapons systems. Give Johnson as much time as you can." The Endurance's weapons let loose a barrage of plasma bolts and missiles, the assault slamming into the enemy ship's shields with earth-shattering force. Vega watched with bated breath as the alien vessels wavered, their defensive systems struggling to withstand the onslaught. "Their shields are down to 50%, Captain," Nguyen reported, her voice tinged with a hint of triumph. "We're starting to make a dent." Vega allowed herself a brief smile, but she knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The alien vessels were still closing in, their massive weapons systems primed and ready to unleash devastation upon the Endurance. "Captain, the combat protocols are ready." Johnson's voice rang out, her tone filled with a mixture of relief and urgency. "I'm diverting all available power to the systems. Get ready for a wild ride." Vega gripped the arms of her chair, her eyes fixed on the view screen as the Endurance's defensive systems flared to life. The ship's shields seemed to shimmer and distort, shifting in ways that defied the laws of physics. "What the?" Sharp breathed, his eyes wide with awe. The alien vessels, their targeting systems seemingly confused by the Endurance's erratic movement, began to falter, their coordinated barrage of fire becoming increasingly erratic and ineffective. "Their weapons systems are malfunctioning, Captain," Nguyen exclaimed, her voice filled with equal parts disbelief and triumph. "The combat protocols are disrupting their targeting algorithms." Vega's lips curled into a grim smile. "Then let's finish this. Nguyen, target their reactor cores and fire everything we've got." The Endurance's weapons systems roared to life, a devastating salvo of plasma bolts and missiles shrieking towards the alien vessels. Vega watched with bated breath as the projectiles slammed into the enemy ships, their hulls buckling and disintegrating under the relentless assault. "Direct hits on all target reactor cores, Captain," Nguyen reported, her voice tinged with awe. "The alien vessels are crippled and venting atmosphere." Vega allowed herself a brief moment of triumph, but she knew their victory was far from assured. The alien commander, no doubt enraged by the loss of his ships, would not rest until he had exacted his revenge. "Johnson, status on the warp drive," she called out, her voice tense. "Working on it, Nora," the engineer replied, her voice strained. "The combat protocols are draining our power reserves faster than I anticipated. We'll need to shut them down soon if we want to have enough juice to make it to the colony." Vega nodded, her gaze shifting to the view screen as the Endurance drifted in the void, its battered hull barely holding together. "Then let's get the hell out of here. Sharp, get us to the colony, maximum warp. Nguyen, keep those sensors peeled for any sign of the enemy." The Endurance's engines roared to life, the human vessel hurtling through the void as it made a desperate bid for safety. Vega watched the alien ship shrink in the distance, her heart pounding in her chest. "We made it," she murmured, the relief evident in her voice. But even as the Endurance raced towards the colony, Vega couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal was far from over. The alien commander had proven to be a formidable foe, and she knew that he would not rest until he had exacted his revenge. As the human vessel approached its destination, Vega steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead. The fate of the colony, and perhaps the future of humanity, rested on their shoulders. And she would be damned if they were going to let the aliens win. The Endurance limped into the human colony spaceport, its battered hull a testament to the harrowing ordeal it had endured. As the ship docked, a crowd of eager onlookers gathered, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and awe. Captain Nora Vega stepped out onto the docking bay, greeted by the colony's administrator, Director Emilia Sanchez. The older woman's eyes widened as she took in the Endurance's condition, her hand instinctively moving to cover her mouth. "Captain Vega, my God," Sanchez breathed, her voice tinged with disbelief. "What happened out there?" Vega offered the director a weary smile. "A little run-in with an alien dreadnought, that's all," she replied, her tone nonchalant. "But don't worry, we gave as good as we got." Sanchez's brow furrowed with concern. "And the supplies? Are they intact?" Vega nodded, gesturing to the Endurance's cargo bay. "Safe and sound, thanks to my crew. We've got everything you requested, and then some." The director let out a sigh of relief, her shoulders visibly relaxing. "Thank goodness. We've been holding our breath, hoping you'd make it back. The past few days have been difficult, to say the least." Vega's expression darkened. "So I've heard. The alien forces have been pressing in, haven't they?" Sanchez nodded grimly. "Yes, and our defenses are stretched thin. We've lost contact with several outlying settlements, and our supplies are dwindling. If you hadn't made it back with those supplies..." She trailed off, the unspoken implication hanging heavy in the air. Vega's jaw tightened with determination. "Then it's a good thing we did. But this isn't over. Emilia, that alien commander is still out there, and he's not going to stop until he's had his revenge." The director's eyes widened. "You mean they'll be coming for us?" "Exactly," Vega replied, her voice grave. "And we need to be ready. I want my crew to begin preparations immediately. Fortify the defenses, distribute the supplies, and get those experimental combat protocols integrated into the colony systems. We're going to need every advantage we can get." Sanchez nodded, her expression resolute. "Consider it done, Captain. Our people will be working around the clock to get everything ready. But what about you and your crew? Surely you need time to rest and regroup." Vega shook her head. "There's no time. The alien commander won't wait, and we need to be proactive if we're going to have any chance of holding them off. My crew and I will be leading the defense efforts personally." "Nora, you and your people have already been through so much," Sanchez protested. "Surely you deserve some time to recuperate, to tend to your wounds." Vega's expression softened, her gaze meeting Sanchez's with a steely determination. "Emilia, this is our fight. We're the ones who stood up to the alien dreadnought, the ones who survived against all odds. If we don't defend this colony, who will?" The director opened her mouth to argue, but the resolute look in Vega's eyes silenced her. She knew the captain was right. The fate of the colony rested on their shoulders, and they couldn't afford to hesitate. "Very well, then," Sanchez said, her voice tinged with a mixture of admiration and concern. "I'll have my people mobilize immediately. Just promise me you'll take care of yourselves, Nora. I can't afford to lose you or your crew." Vega offered the director a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Amelia. We're not going anywhere. This is our home, and we'll fight to the last to defend it." With that, the captain turned and strode back towards the Endurance, her crew already assembling to begin the preparations for the looming battle. Sanchez watched them go, a newfound sense of hope blossoming in her heart. As the Endurance's engines fired up once more, Vega stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She knew that the alien commander would not rest until he had exacted his revenge, and she was determined to be ready. "All right, people, listen up," she said, her voice commanding the attention of her crew. "We've got a lot of work to do, and not much time to do it. I want those combat protocols integrated into the colony's defenses as soon as possible. Nguyen, I need you to coordinate with their tactical teams to ensure maximum coverage. Sharp, work with Johnson to get the Endurance back into fighting shape. We're going to need every last ounce of firepower we can muster." Her crew nodded, their expressions resolute. They knew the stakes, and they were ready to put everything on the line to defend their home. "This is it, people," Vega said, her voice tinged with a hint of determination. "The fight of our lives. Let's show these aliens what humanity is made of." The Endurance hummed with activity as Captain Vega's crew worked tirelessly to prepare the human colony's defenses for the impending alien assault. Dr. Sarah Johnson, the ship's brilliant chief engineer, was at the forefront of the effort, her fingers flying across the console as she integrated the experimental combat protocols into the colony's systems. "All right, people, listen up," Vega said, her voice commanding the attention of her crew. "We don't have much time, so I need everything to be running at peak efficiency. Johnson, how are those combat protocols coming along?" "Almost there, Captain," Johnson replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I've managed to reconfigure the systems to work with the colony's defensive network. We should have full integration within the next hour." Vega nodded, her gaze shifting to the tactical display. "Good. Nguyen, I want you to work with the colony's defense teams to coordinate our defenses. We need to be ready for anything the aliens throw at us." Aye, Captain," Nguyen replied, already moving to relay the orders. As the crew sprung into action, Vega couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The alien commander had proven to be a formidable foe, and she knew that he would not rest until he had exacted his revenge. The fate of the colony, and perhaps the future of humanity, rested on their shoulders. "Sharp, how's the Endurance holding up?" she asked, turning her attention to her first officer. "Not good, I'm afraid," Sharp replied, his expression grim. "The engines are barely holding together, and the shields are operating at half strength. We're going to need to divert a significant amount of power just to keep the ship from falling apart." Vega's jaw tightened. "Then we'll have to make do with what we've got. Can we at least get the weapon systems up to full power?" Sharp nodded. "I've already redirected all available power to the armaments. We should be able to unleash hell on the aliens when they arrive." "Good," Vega said, her lips curling into a grim smile, "because I have a feeling they're not going to be happy to see us." As the hours ticked by, the human colony's defenses took shape, with the Endurance's combat protocols seamlessly integrating with the planetary shield grid and weapon emplacements. Vega watched the preparations with a mixture of pride and trepidation, knowing that the fate of her people hung in the balance. Suddenly, the sensors blared to life, detecting a massive energy signature on the edge of the system. Vega's heart raced as she recognized the distinctive profile of the alien dreadnought, its massive hull dwarfing the smaller human vessels that accompanied it. "Captain, the alien fleet is within firing range," Nguyen reported, her voice tense. "They're powering up their weapon systems." Vega's jaw tightened. All hands, battle stations. Johnson, are those combat protocols ready? You bet, Nora, the engineer replied, her voice tinged with determination. Just say the word, and I'll unleash hell on those alien bastards. Vega nodded, her gaze fixed on the view screen as the alien ships advanced. Then do it. Nguyen, target their engines and weapons. Sharp, divert all available power to the shields and weapons. The human colony's defenses roared to life, a barrage of plasma bolts and missiles streaking towards the alien vessels. To Vega's relief, the combat protocols were working as intended, disrupting the enemy's targeting systems and rendering their firepower less effective. Their shields are down to 70% and falling, Captain, Nguyen reported, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and triumph. The combat protocols are working. Vega allowed herself a brief smile, but she knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The alien dreadnought was still advancing, its massive weapons systems primed and ready to unleash devastation upon the human colony. Johnson, can you redirect more power to the shields? She asked, her voice tense. I'm trying, Nora, but the systems are already pushed to their limits, the engineer replied, her frustration evident. If we divert any more power, we're going to start losing critical systems. Vega's jaw tightened. Then we'll have to make do with what we've got. Nguyen, target their main cannon. Let's see if we can take that thing out of the fight. The Endurance's weapons roared to life, a devastating salvo of plasma bolts and missiles streaking towards the alien dreadnought's massive cannon. Vega held her breath, watching as the projectile slammed into the enemy's defenses, the shield grid flickering and faltering under the relentless assault. But even as the human forces gained the upper hand, Vega couldn't shake the feeling that the alien commander had something else up his sleeve. She knew that he wouldn't go down without a fight, and she was determined to be ready for whatever he had in store. As the battle raged on, Vega steeled herself for the fight of her life. The fate of the colony, and perhaps the future of humanity, rested on her shoulders, and she would be damned if she was going to let the aliens win. The human colony's defenses blazed with intensity as the Endurance and its crew fought to hold off the relentless alien onslaught. Captain Vega gripped the arms of her chair, her eyes narrowed with fierce determination as she watched the battle unfold. Status report, she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. Shields down to 40% and holding, Captain, Sharp reported, his fingers flying across the console. The combat protocols are disrupting their targeting, but we can't keep this up much longer. Vega's jaw tightened. Then we'll have to end this, quickly. Nguyen, target their main cannon again. Let's see if we can take that thing out of the fight once and for all. The Endurance's weapon systems roared to life, a devastating salvo of plasma bolts and missiles streaking towards the alien dreadnought's massive cannon. Vega held her breath, watching as the projectile slammed into the enemy's defenses, the shield grid flickering and faltering under the relentless assault. Direct hit on the main cannon, Captain, Nguyen exclaimed, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. It's down, and the alien fleet is reeling. Vega allowed herself a brief smile, but she knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The alien commander, enraged by the loss of his prized weapon, would not rest until he had extracted his revenge. Don't celebrate just yet. People, she said, her voice stern. That alien bastard is still out there, and he's not going to stop until he's seen us all dead. Nguyen, keep those sensors peeled for any sign of movement. Sharp, divert all available power to the shields and weapons. We need to be ready for anything. As the human forces continued their relentless assault, the alien dreadnought lumbered forward, its remaining weapons systems primed and ready to unleash devastation upon the colony. Vega watched with bated breath, her fingers drumming nervously on the arms of her chair. Captain, the alien fleet is regrouping, Nguyen reported, her voice tinged with concern. They're powering up their remaining weapon systems. Vega's jaw tightened. Then let's give them a warm welcome. Sharp Johnson, I need everything you've got. Nguyen, target their engines and weapons. Let's show these aliens what humanity is made of. The Endurance's weapon systems roared to life, a devastating barrage of plasma bolts and missiles streaking towards the alien vessels. Vega watched with a grim satisfaction as the projectiles slammed into the enemy's defenses, the shield grid flickering and faltering under the relentless assault. Their shields are down to 20% and falling, Captain, Nguyen reported, her voice tinged with awe. We're starting to make a real dent. But even as the human forces gained the upper hand, Vega couldn't shake the feeling that the alien commander had something else up his sleeve. She knew that he wouldn't go down without a fight, and she was determined to be ready for whatever he had in store. Suddenly, the sensors blared to life, detecting a massive energy surge from the alien dreadnought's reactor core. Vega's eyes widened in horror as she realized what was happening. All hands, brace for impact, she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. The Endurance shuddered as the alien vessel's reactor core detonated in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave rippling through the void and slamming into the human ship. Vega gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles turning white as she watched the devastation unfold. Shields down, hull breaches on all decks, Sharp reported, his voice tinged with panic. We're venting atmosphere, and the warp drive is offline again. Vega's jaw tightened, her mind racing as she considered their options. They were crippled, adrift in the middle of a war zone, and with no means of escape. But she refused to give up, not when they were so close to victory. Damage control teams, get those breaches sealed, she ordered, her voice calm and unwavering. Nguyen, scan for any nearby ships, friendly or otherwise. We need to get back on the move. And fast. As the Endurance's crew worked frantically to restore their battered systems, Vega turned her attention to the tactical display, her eyes narrowing with determination. The alien fleet, now scattered and disorganized, was still a formidable threat, but she knew that they had one last trick up their sleeve. Johnson, can you reroute the remaining power from the combat protocols to the weapons systems? She asked, her voice urgent. The engineer's eyes widened, a glimmer of understanding dawning on her face. I think so, Nora. But it's going to be risky. We'll be running on fumes, and the Endurance won't be able to take much more punishment. Vega nodded, her gaze fixed on the view screen as the alien vessels began to regroup. Then do it. We've come too far to give up now. This ends today. As the Endurance's weapons systems roared to life with a renewed intensity, Vega steeled herself for the final confrontation. The fate of the colony, and perhaps the future of humanity, rested on their shoulders, and she would be damned if they were going to let the aliens win.